If you will, take your Bibles and open them to the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 8, the 8th chapter of Matthew. This is the chapter that follows the Sermon on the Mount. And as you will see in the opening verses, it is characterized by a few miracles. And we're going to be looking at a miracle this morning. It shows the Lord's authority over nature. He controls the storms. He controls the seas. He controls all of nature. Jesus is God's agent in creation. And so, Him being the Creator, He has total control over these things. And so we're going to look at this focus on the text, verses 23 through 27, and where Jesus brings a great calm in the middle of a storm. But for us to understand this completely in its context, I want you to roll your eyes up to verse 18. And this is the context in which this miracle occurs. It is His teaching on discipleship. If you'll notice in verse 18, it says, "Now when Jesus saw a crowd around Him, He gave orders to go over to the other side." And so, hold that thought, because in just a minute, they're going to get in a boat, and they're going to go over to the other side. And so what I'm telling you is, what Jesus says in verses 18 through 22 should be entirely attached to what happens in the boat, and what happens on the Sea of Galilee. In fact, He's already told them, hey, we're fixing to get in the boat. Get ready, and we're going to get in the boat. And so, something happens, a couple of things happen right before they get in the boat. And so, listen to this, and I don't think it's any accident that He's sort of interrupted, He's sort of sidetracked from them getting in the boat. He says in verse 19, a scribe said to Him. So, you know, the scribes weren't always friendly to Jesus. They were often ones who would try to entrap Him. They would often be ones who would question His authority. They would be generally hostile towards Jesus. However, we find an exception. We think to be an exception here. I'm not sure, though, if you look at Jesus' words and His response, it's kind of left undetermined whether He was sincere in following Jesus. But the scribe says, I will follow you wherever you go. And so we would just take that at face value and say, okay, the scribe wants to follow Jesus. Notice what Jesus says here. He says that foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay His head. So what Jesus is, just in short summary here, what He is saying is, are you sure you want to follow me? Because you don't know where I'm going, and I really don't have a place to go right here. Not saying that he shouldn't follow Him, but just getting the guy to think, are you sure you want to follow me? Because where I am going, you may not want to go. You may not really be willing to go. And so all Jesus is doing here is a lesson on counting the cost of discipleship. There's a lot of people that say they want to follow Jesus. In fact, there's a lot of people who say they are following Jesus, but the question still remains, are you really following Jesus? And if you do follow Jesus, do you know the cost of discipleship? Because as you'll see in this text, discipleship and following Jesus is not always easy. And so then a second person comes. It says, Matthew says, and another disciple asked Him, or said to Him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. In other words, I want to follow you, Jesus, but I have some other priorities. There are some things in my life that I want to get straightened out. There's some things in my life that I want to take care of first. there's some things in my life that are more important to me than following you right now. But I do want to follow you. And so, as you can tell, following Jesus is many times attractive. Following Jesus may be trendy. Following Jesus may be hip. Following Jesus may be what others do, and then you want to do it, but Jesus is saying, first of all, you need to think about what you're getting into. Do you really want to follow me? And so what we're reminded here of is that following Jesus is not something that is at your leisure. You don't get to follow him how you want to follow him. You either follow Jesus or you don't. So what he says here, he says, Jesus said to him, follow me. He doesn't say, okay, good idea. Why don't you take care of all of your affairs in your life, get everything straightened out, and then come and follow me. He says, follow me. It's very point blank. It's very simple. It's very direct. Follow me. And so as you can see, there is no in-between. There is no following Jesus at our leisure. There's no following Jesus and we think that we get to make the rules. There's no following Jesus and it is really it's my journey in my life and I'm following and you are either following him or you're not. That seems kind of harsh, I know, but we're going to have to get over it. He says, let the dead bury their dead. Those who are not following Jesus are dead. It doesn't mean, this is not a commentary on whether or not it's a good thing to have a funeral. This is not what this is about. This is about discipleship. Now watch what happens in verse 18. Verse 23. And when he got into the boat, right? When he got into the boat. That's what he's been talking about the whole time. Notice what happens. His disciples followed him. I want to go back and I want to share something with you that came to me this week. Back where it says, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. In the book of Mark, in this same account of being in the boat, it talks about Jesus laying his head on the pillow. Jesus is very poor. Jesus doesn't have a home. He's homeless, and he's going to lay his head in the boat. Jesus is working. Jesus is fulfilling God's purpose. Jesus has been sent to this earth for a purpose. And he's working, and with blinders on and looking straight ahead, Jesus is obedient to the Father's will. What does it mean to follow Jesus? It means the same thing. Following Jesus, being obedient to Jesus, not knowing what's coming up next. And there's things that's going to come up in your life. There's going to be difficult times that's going to come up in your life. But you still follow Jesus. Another interesting thing about laying his head that I discovered, I was looking, what else does it say in the New Testament? This word, klino. Interesting that it's used in John chapter 19 and verse 30, where it says, and they gave him vinegar to drink, and Jesus said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. It's been translated 2 times bowed, 2 times laid. Jesus, at the end of his life, he had a place to lay his head on the cross. He laid his head on the cross. In this life, he didn't have. Now listen to me. You say, that's kind of random, Brother John. I don't understand where you're going. Let me tell you this. In this life, it won't always be easy, and you may not think that you're going to have a place to lay your head, but this life is not all there is to it. There is a life beyond, and you will lay your head at the end of the day in the bosom of the Father. So when it comes down to counting the cost, we don't look at a child of God shouldn't nor do I think they truly do, look at the cost of following Jesus in the same terms that an unbeliever will, and they don't look at the material cost of following Jesus. They know that this world is not my home, and there's something afterwards waiting on me. It is a home with God in heaven. Now notice this. There's going to be, they enter the boat. The storm comes along in verse 24. Notice what it says. And behold, I love the gospel writers, and when they use, and behold, it seems to mean something surprising, something unexpected. It's almost like we would say, and there you go, there it was, and behold, oh, out of nowhere. And that is exactly what happened. It said there arose, and so if behold is not enough to convey the sense of surprise or unexpectedness, here we have, it says there arose a great storm. And so this is not an uncommon thing in the Sea of Galilee. By the way, the Sea of Galilee, if you're wanting some kind of reference, is about the size of Greer's Ferry or Lake Ouachita, but it was a round, oval-shaped lake, about the same amount of square acres there. So another thing, though, is that the Sea of Galilee is ringed with mountains. There is, on one end, it's open, and the winds will come in, these westerly winds come into the Sea of Galilee, and oftentimes a fierce and unexpected raging storm will arise. That's what happens here. No one saw it coming. They were in a boat. They got in a boat. They're following Jesus. They're on the lake. They're going to the other side. They don't know why they're going to the other side, but they're following Jesus, and a storm arises unexpectedly. And it was we have a description of that storm. It says a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. Luke and Mark say that the boat is filling up with water. Matthew is talking about the size of the waves compared to the boat. In other words, if you were somewhere else on the lake, the waves would be so big that would be hiding the boat. They would be 8-foot, 9-foot waves, and the boat would be dropping down, and the waves would be lifting it up, and it was just rising and falling. And the waves were bigger than the boat. In other words, they felt like that they were being overcome by the sea. And so notice this, it says, but he was asleep. And so Jesus is asleep. Jesus is, he's not talking to them. He's not sharing in their fear here. He's not participating in the struggle. Jesus has been teaching all day. He's tired. He's a man of sorts, and we're going to get there in just a minute. In his humanity, he is tired. He is physically exhausted, and he's laying down and he's sleeping. Well, this doesn't bring a lot of consolation and encouragement to those who are not sleeping, because they are white-knuckled holding on for their lives. The boat is being covered up and overcome by this sea. Notice in verse 25, there is an interaction here between Jesus and his disciples. And the first thing we notice is that the fear of the disciples. They're very fearful. And so they're following Jesus. They're very fearful. It says in verse 25, save us. They went and woke him saying, and then they said, save us, Lord. And then they said, we are perishing. And so first of all, they asked him for a rescue. They asked him for help. They're not asking him to save their souls. They're not lost. In other words, they're not wanting to be saved today. Right? They're not wanting to, they don't think that they're lost. They're saying, we want physical rescue. We want earthly, physical salvation. We want you to throw us a life preserver and keep us from drowning here. So they're not lost. Don't think that. But they're saying, save us, rescue us. And then they plead for help. They say, we are dying. We are going to die. We are going down. We are not going to make it. We are going to die. We're in what is happening to us right now, we are dying. So they've said, this is it. I don't know if you've ever been on an airplane and you've experienced turbulence before. By the way, I should have mentioned the interesting word for storm that Matthew uses is different than Mark in that it speaks of it's the same word that's used to describe an earthquake. It is a word that means to be shaken. It means it's a word that you would not describe a downpour of rain and thunder and lightning, but it would be one that you would use to describe an earthquake. And so here the disciples are in this boat and they're shaking. And they say, we're dying. We're going to go down with this ship. And so notice here that Jesus responds to their fear. Verse 26, and he said to them, why are you afraid? So two things happened. First of all, two things happened when they woke him. They said, we are dying. And they said, save us. Right? Here, Jesus says two things back to them. He says, something's wrong with your faith. Your faith is inadequate, it's deficient. Okay? Well, don't you love that? When you learn a hard lesson in life, and you realize, a lot of it is my fault. It was not Jesus' fault that they were fearful. You know how many times that people blame God for what's going on in their life? People want to say, well, it can't be me. It can't be me if God wouldn't have allowed this thing to come into my life, then it wouldn't be that bad. It's God's fault. You know how many people are bitter towards God because of what has happened in their life? And so Jesus says, there's a problem with your faith. And the second thing, there's a problem with your fear. So he challenges their fear. Why are you fearing? What in the world are you got to be afraid of here? And so their fear is an obstacle to their faith. Fear and faith are not compatible. You say, Brother John, I'm having a hard time. Yeah, you're not the first one that's had a hard time. These people had a hard time with it too. And you've had a hard time. I've had a hard time. We've all had a hard time in life trying to understand and not be fearful in a situation that it's a life-changing situation. It's your life is in jeopardy. But Jesus says your fear shouldn't be what it is. Your fear is too high, and your faith is too little. And so, as you can see that relationship that Jesus is making with their fear, we're supposed to have less fear and more faith. Easier said than done. That is why you are not who you are when you're initially saved. Part of this is about spiritual maturity. These men are learning on the job. They are following. Now listen to me, this is very important. They are following Jesus, and here they get to experience a life-threatening situation, something where their fear is challenged, and then Jesus is going to challenge their faith. And so Jesus is giving them the remedy. On-the-job training. We have on-the-job training too, right? After you're saved, you don't know everything just initially when you're saved. But after you're saved, you're following Jesus. And as you follow Jesus, there's going to be things arise in your life unexpected where it's going to test your fear and it's going to test your faith. Notice how he comes to an end of this narrative here. Jesus, after he addresses them, he turns away from them. He pivots away from them, and he looks at the storm, he looks at the waves, he looks at the wind, and he rebukes the wind and the waves. Notice what it says here in verse 26. Verse 26 in the second part. Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. Well, there's a lot in this half of a verse here. First of all, as I told you a while ago, Jesus is the agent of God in creation. He has authority over the wind. He has authority over the seas. With His word, He can speak to the seas. With His word, He can speak to the wind, and it is obedient to Him. Whatever the word of Jesus is, the word of Jesus is final. I don't know why in the world you're fearful when you are a follower of Jesus and His word is more powerful than the sea and more powerful than the wind. And so Jesus here exercises His authority. He rebukes the wind, and the result of this is a great calm. Notice how the disciples react in verse 27. They say, and the men marvel, they're astonished, and this is what they said. What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey Him? Well, notice what it said. Go back here, look at verse 27 at the beginning. And the men. You see that? And the men. Well, it says the men because they're physically men, they're of the male gender, and that's who's there. But I think that there's something of a picture here behind this. And it's this. The humanity. The men. You see what I'm saying? The human person is astonished at this. Mankind is astonished. You follow me? The men were marveling. Men marvel. Men are astonished. Men are bewildered at what they see, because of what they've seen doesn't come from a man. We know that a man, just a man, an ordinary man, would not be able to do this. This goes to the idea of who is Jesus? Who is? Who is this man? Who is this man? Because the men are marveling, the men are astonished because of what Jesus does. Dear friend, this sets Jesus apart from being an ordinary man. And then they ask the question, what kind of man is this? What sort of man is this? Well, we know, they were learning, we get to look at Scripture, that this is the Son of God. This is the God-man. This is one who is all God and at the same time walks in flesh. And so we know that here we see them learning about who God is and learning about this man Jesus that they're following. Let me tell you something. If you're not learning about who you're following, you may not be following him. There may be something wrong with your approach to the Christian life. I want to come back to verse 27 in just a minute. But some people, I'm afraid, and I'll tell you this because I used to do it, and you may be doing it now, or you may be used to do it. Some people are not really following Jesus. Although they're saved, they're not following Jesus. And they're living life the way they want to live. They're living, they have got their own little roadmap. Now, I'm going through life. And what I can do is, I'm a born-again believer. I have some special status with God. I've been redeemed. I've got a place in heaven. But you know what? I'm going to live life the way I want to live it. And along the way, we can just look for little affirmations. Oh, there's a sign that God's in my life. Oh, look at this little thing that popped up. God's in my life. My question to you is this. Are you following Him? Or are you just have your own expectations about life? And along the way, you just want a little affirmation. I'm going to tell you that doesn't count.
That doesn't cut it. You either follow him or you don't. It's not your way. It's God's way. It's the way of following Jesus. Notice what they say. What kind of man is this? Right? That even the winds and the sea obey him. As I said a while ago, Jesus is no ordinary man. And Jesus has authority over nature. Jesus has authority over the winds and the sea. So Jesus has a special kind of authority. I don't know about you, but that's who I want to follow. That's who we all need to follow. That's who we must follow. We need to quit trying to go through our lives and feel like that I can make the rules, I can make the way, I can draw the roadmap. We need to submit to the will of God and follow Jesus. He is the one with authority. Well, there's some obvious applications here that we've already touched on. Let me go through a few of them or share a few with you. The first of all is that our faith is meant to be alive, but also in the midst of the sovereignty of God. You know what sovereignty of God means? It means what I see on a lot of your Facebook pages and what I see a lot of you post, God is in control. That's what the sovereignty of God means. And so you say, yeah, I want to have a living faith. I want to have a vibrant faith. And I believe that God is in control. I believe all that. But here's the part that you have to accept. Is that even though your faith is alive, and even though you are following Jesus, remembering that He's in control when things go haywire, when things seem to fall apart, we still believe that God is in control, and it won't break my faith down, and it won't destroy it. Remembering who Jesus is, that He's the God-man, remembering that He has authority over all things, helps us to realize that we have to have a living faith, even in the midst of trial and tribulation, because He is in control. The second thing is this: He's the Lord of all. He is the Lord of the wind, of the clouds, of the earth, of the earthquakes, of the floods, of all of the things. He holds this whole world in His hands, and there's nothing that happens that doesn't slip past God, doesn't slip past Jesus. Jesus is the master of all creation. But this, we've already touched on this as well, discipleship. Sometimes discipleship includes traveling on a rough road. Discipleship is not easy. Following Jesus doesn't always mean that you're somehow put in this bubble of protection and that there's nothing that can touch you. I'm untouchable now that I'm a follower of Jesus. That is simply not true. That is a deception. That is just a wrong idea. That's not practical. And here's what we need. The fear that he's talking about, it involves a practical trust with Jesus. Do you understand what I mean? That means everyday trust. That means on Monday, I trust Jesus, and then when something happens Monday night, on Tuesday, I'm not questioning Jesus. I still trust Jesus. I mean, you may take my family away. You may end up like Job. You may end up losing your home. You may end up losing your job. You may end up losing it all, but I still trust Jesus. So this brings us to our last point, is that we face our fears in Christ. A believer is in Christ. The Bible talks about Over and over, I'm thinking about the book of Ephesians and how many times that phrase, being in Christ, is mentioned. But when you are in Christ, that means you are saved, you are born again, and all of the benefits and the privileges and the honor that Jesus is for him, it is also for you. You are included in all of the blessings that Jesus has. You are still included that. You're going to be a part of Christ. Now listen to me. At the same time, we are in the flesh and we're fearful at times. I'm not saying you're not going to be fearful, and I'm not saying you're stupid for being fearful, and that's not what Jesus is saying. But what Jesus is saying is this: you don't really need to be as fearful as you are when you are in Christ. Let's stand at this time, and I'm going to ask Sister Velma and Sister Donnie, if you all will, let's sing a verse of song.